This is the story of Laura Hurst, a 36-year-old mother and snake enthusiast who enjoys rescuing and rehabilitating reptiles. What began as a routine visit to her beloved snakes at a friend's house turned tragic. A normal evening quickly turned into a terrifying scene when a reticulated python wrapped around her neck. Laura Hurst was a 36-year-old mother of two from Indiana, known for her deep love of nature, animals, and especially reptiles. She grew up on her family's cattle farm, where she developed a passion for the outdoors and animals early in life. Laura was more than just an animal lover. She had a special interest in rescuing and rehabilitating snakes, which became an important part of her life. This interest distinguished her from many others, as snakes are frequently regarded with fear or unease. Laura saw their beauty and felt a strong desire to care for and protect them. Professionally, she worked as a harness engineering build technician. Laura's colleagues and friends admired her, and she wasn't shy about sharing her love for snakes, once even bringing one to work to the delight of her coworkers. Laura's dedication to her snakes was clear to everyone who knew her. In 2019, there was a house on North Dan Patch Drive in Oxford, Indiana, that no one officially lived in, but it was far from empty. It had more inhabitants than any other home on the block, a total of 140 snakes. These reptiles came in all shapes, sizes, and species, with most of them belonging to Benton County Sheriff Don Munson. His love for snakes even inspired his daughter, and one day he brought a snake named Simba, a striking 13-foot, 4-meter reticulated python weighing 45 pounds, 20 kilograms, to her elementary school. The children were fascinated by the giant snake, eagerly stroking its shiny, smooth skin. Simba was a big hit with the students and staff alike. At that time, Don mentioned that he kept 52 snakes in his garage and was breeding them for sale. Before long, the number increased. Don owned a house specifically designed to accommodate his growing collection of snakes, and since he lived next door, he could easily keep an eye on them. He bred snakes to sell, but 20 of the reptiles weren't his. They belonged to another snake enthusiast, Laura Hurst. Laura enjoyed rescuing and rehabilitating snakes. Housing her snakes at Don's property was a perfect setup for Laura, as she lived just 20 minutes away and visited the house twice a week to check on them. The snake house was a single-story dark blue bungalow with a garage on one side. Inside, hundreds of cages and tanks housed the snakes. And although the conditions met legal standards, Don had never officially registered his snake breeding operation with local authorities, which could have been an issue. There were no warning signs outside to alert visitors about the snakes inside, so only Don's family and Laura knew what was housed there until tragedy occurred. On the evening of October 30th, 2019, Laura Hurst drove toward North Dan Patch Drive in Oxford, Indiana, as part of her routine. Twice a week she made this trip to check on her beloved snakes housed at the property of Don Munson. This particular evening seemed no different. As she pulled into the concrete driveway and unlocked the front door, she entered the dimly lit bungalow that had become home to 140 snakes. Inside, the air was thick, with the warmth and humidity required to keep the snakes comfortable. Hundreds of cages and tanks lined the walls, each housing reptiles of various species and sizes. Laura was used to this environment. She inspected the snakes, her trained eye moving over their enclosures to make sure everything was as it should be. Her love for these creatures was evident in how carefully she moved, how she handled them with care and respect. But on this particular night, something went horribly wrong. Laura decided to handle one of Don Munson's reticulated pythons, which she had probably cared for many times before. It was only 8 feet long, which was small in comparison to some of the giant snakes she had previously worked with. She carefully removed it from its tank, feeling the familiar coolness of its smooth, patterned skin against her fingers. The snake flicked its tongue, inspecting its surroundings as she sat with it coiled around her lap. Reticulated pythons are known for their incredible strength, and though Laura had experience with these powerful creatures, They kill their prey through constriction, wrapping their powerful coils around the victim and squeezing tighter with every breath until the prey can no longer breathe or pump blood. In the wild, they usually feed on mammals such as rodents, pigs, and even deer. While they are not venomous, their strength is more than enough to make them lethal in certain situations. As the snake crawled over her legs, Laura gently lifted it, planning to return it to its enclosure. But as she stood, the snake's body began to tighten around her neck. At first, it may have seemed like the snake was simply adjusting its position. That is an innocent movement. But within seconds, the snake's grip became stronger. Laura tugged at the python, trying to loosen its coils, but the more she pulled, the tighter the snake constricted. The python's powerful muscles, designed to crush and suffocate prey in the wild, were now pressing against Laura's neck with unbearable force. She attempted to reach for her phone, but her movements were restricted. She started to panic as the pressure on her chest and throat increased, and her heart began to race. The snake, sensing her struggle, tightened its grip. Laura's vision became increasingly blurry as time passed. She fought desperately, but the python's coils were unstoppable, cutting off her oxygen and blood supply to her brain. Laura was alone in the house and had no way to call for help. Her lips turned blue, her eyes bulged, and she passed out within minutes due to a lack of oxygen. She collapsed to the floor, unable to free herself from the snake's lethal grip. Meanwhile, just next door, Don Munson noticed Laura's car still parked outside. It wasn't unusual for her to spend time with the snakes, but something didn't feel right. Concerned, he decided to check on her. He walked over to the house, entered, and called out to her. There was no response. As he walked through the snake-filled rooms, he passed the open tank from which the python had been removed. Then, in the next room, he found Laura lying motionless on the floor. The 8-foot python was still loosely wrapped around her neck. In a rush of panic, Don pulled the snake off her and immediately called emergency services. Paramedics arrived quickly, but despite their efforts to revive her, it was too late. Laura Hurst, the woman who had spent her life caring for the creatures she loved, had tragically lost her life in a tragic accident involving one of the very animals she had devoted so much of herself to. Since 1978, there have been 18 documented deaths caused by constricting snakes in the U.S. However, reptile enthusiasts argue that dogs are responsible for far more injuries and fatalities each year than snakes. Laura's tragic case made headlines because such incidents are extremely rare. In the aftermath, local council members pushed for a new law requiring snake owners to disclose where their snakes were kept for public safety and emergency preparedness. However, Don Munson could have faced even more legal trouble if it was discovered that he was breeding snakes for sale without registering his property as a business. Thank you for watching. If you want to know more shocking animal attacks, click on this next video. Don't miss out. Hit the subscribe button for more terrifying stories. Until next time.